So, I was born in Puerto Rico, and around the age of 5, I remember clear as yesterday, our father sat us down at the dinner table and was like, "Hey guys, we have an opportunity to either move to New York or Florida, but I'm gonna leave it up to you guys." And we wanted to move to Florida. We had some cousins there that we loved, and we wanted to be with them. So yeah, we wound up moving to Hollywood, Florida, and my father was able to start a church. Since a kid, I was the guy on the drums, on the bongos, and just being that PK. I was so happy that I was able to do that because it was like a GPS. Who knows where I'd be right now if I never had that instilled in my life through an earlier age. It was my 18th birthday. It was a midweek service, and I remember like it was yesterday, I decided not to go anymore. I decided that I would take my life into my own hands, do whatever I wanted. I started doing music. I was, dealing with the local radio stations, and I was already getting like sort of buzz and things of that nature. So I guess you could say maybe it was starting to get to my head, and I started feeling like I could do stuff. And I remember I left, and of course there was some turmoil and hardships in the household and things of that nature, but nobody could physically tell me, "Hey man, you gotta go and you're gonna go." And it was just a conscious decision. I started hanging out. I started just being out there, all the way involved, and through music, you start to really. It was like a portal that I never even knew existed. The life and the industry. It enters you into this place of everything. Everything is there, and that's probably the beginning of, what I call the lost decade. 10 years of just being lost and just being out there, and mom wondering, and I know mom was crying and praying, but. I just felt I had to do whatever I wanted to do. I wouldn't tell my parents where I was. My mom's like, "Where are you? I just want to bring you $20." And I'd be like, "Mom, I can't tell you where I am. I'll meet you at the drugstore, and I'll give you my laundry. Could you wash it for me?" And we would talk for a few minutes, and she would cry and say, "Your dad wants to see you," and stuff like that. But I was being prideful, I guess, when I look back. And I never wanted him to see me like that, and I never wanted him to see his son just being broken down and not being able to fulfill probably what his dreams were. So I call it the lost decade, but for people who know me in the Hollywood area, I was a pretty popular guy. I was always involved in the mix. Even when I was gone for those 10 years, I wasn't necessarily homeless. I didn't live at my home where my parents were, but I always had friends, and I'd run into money here and there because obviously I started hustling, and I started messing around with drugs and just like getting involved in those type of things to make ends meet. Although it was very detrimental to my life and to my future, but I couldn't see myself, just being stuck out there. And the influences and the people that I started hanging out with, it was just leading me to that. My mother always told me, everybody knows this, tell me who you hang with and I'll tell you who you are. And you could rewind and take me to the time when I was hanging in church, and you could tell that I was a church man. But when I was hanging out in the streets in Hollywood during those years, and I was hanging around with negative influences, even though they were my friends, even though I loved them and we had love for each other, the things that we were teaching each other and the things that we were doing weren't taking us to a good place. I remember the one night, and I'll get into that real fast. I was in a house that me and my friend, we were hustling, so we were paying the rent together. I had gone to New York for about a couple months, and I came back. So during that time that I was away, things were going on that I wasn't aware of. So when I came home, I didn't know the rent wasn't being paid. I didn't know that they were, doing things without, taking care of them correctly. I'm talking about the streets. They were being involved in the streets, but not doing it correctly. So when I came home, I didn't know that the house was under fire. I didn't know the house was being looked at or just a bad place to be because no one filled me in. So one night, me and my friends are just writing. We're writing raps and stuff, and we're smoking and we're doing things and just hanging out. And I just remember something in my gut instinct told my friends it was time to wrap it up. It was time to go, for them to leave. I didn't have anywhere to go but there, but I told them to leave. 15 minutes later, I get a knock on the door, and I have a gun in my face, and I get forced into the home. And the other people come inside, and they start doing what they're doing, ransacking the house. And I just remember praying in my head because I have a guy with a gun in my face, and he constantly keeps going like this, like trying to obviously put fear in me. And I just remember, I'm like, man, I know this sounds so ridiculous, but I'm like, I'm never gonna rap. It's over here. This is it. It's done. I'm never gonna rap. No one's ever gonna, you know, see what my dreams were. No one's ever gonna know anything about me past this point. And they ransacked the house, and I don't know if they found what they were looking for, if they didn't, but they ran out, and the other guy ran out with them, and the Lord spared me that night. Ironically enough, that was probably just the beginnings of the lost decade. I'd still go on and pursue it regardless of what that was, and had a gun in my face another time after that. It's just a repetitive cycle. You continue, it's called insanity, continue to do the same things over and over, trying to look for a different result. And that's how I look at it back. I said, man, I must have been insane. But, I just look now and I just thank God that he spared me and he had a plan for me. Probably the lowest point I remember because I'm not the type of person who has ever considered suicide or got into that depth of, of the cycle. But I remember one time we threw a party and we were in a hotel and there was a bunch of us and we're doing everything imaginable, drinking, smoking, cocaine is involved, everything is there, and we're doing everything at the same time. And I just remember at one point, I start to feel not right. I start to feel super hype, but like in my chest, and I'm already feeling like, oh my God, like, I started feeling anxious. And, first thought in my mind was like, yo, I did too much. And I'm like, oh man, this is not a good time for me right now with all these people right here. But I wound up going outside the hotel room by myself, not really letting anybody know what was going on. And I just had my hands on the rail, just kind of like leaning over and kind of just like trying to catch my breath and stuff like that. And this is like the only time I could remember like somebody talking in my ear, and just telling me to jump. Go ahead, man. Just jump. Just come on, man. You're too crunk. You did too much. Come on, man. You got to go now. Now you got to go. And the one thing, I don't know, this is ridiculous, but the only thing I could remember, because, this happened to my other boys, people have, overdosed, and stuff like that. And they'd be like, yo, you got to drink a gallon of milk, man. You got to drink a gallon of milk. And I said, and I'm starting to scream. People are like, know that I'm paranoid now. I'm like, yo, get some milk, get some milk. And this girl went and got some milk, and I'm chugging the gallon, and I'm chugging the gallon. And after that, I start to kind of like regain my wits, and I laid down for a second, and I start to gather my thoughts. And I could possibly say that's one of the lowest points in my life, because you could think, oh man, but you were having fun, or you were like, man, you were living it up, you're partying. But that was the only time in my life I ever thought about taking my life. So, you can only go so far living like that before some tragic could happen. And regardless of what I was going through, I still kept rapping and I still kept meeting people. And I wound up getting a situation that Sony called one of my friends. And they wanted to talk to him about some possible music things. And I was on one of the songs that he was on, so they were curious on who the other guy was as well, and they bring him to the meeting. So I wound up going to the meeting, and that's how I met, Sony Music, Sony Latin at the time. And, I started thinking that maybe that was gonna happen, but throughout that and just hanging out way more, I started to get heavier involved in coke and stuff like that. And the thing with coke, it starts to play with your mind and deteriorate your mind. So even though if you think you're thinking straight and you could be feeling that way, you're not really making rational decisions or doing things how you would usually do. I started getting so, hooked on coke to the point that I always wanted it around me. So I started selling it. It was only a matter of time before I got caught. I got caught, they gave me trafficking. My first time ever getting arrested in Broward County. I did 3 years. I did 3 years in prison, 2007 through 2010. And a lot of times people go to prison and they'll tell you, oh man, like I was in the chapel every day and like, and the Lord touched me. And that happens because I saw that happen. But in my life, I'm gonna tell you how it happened. Probably the first week or second week that I was locked up, South Florida Reception Center in Doral, I was invited to the chapel one night it was a midweek service, ironically enough. We got there early, people were praying. And the first thing that when I walked into the chapel, small little chapel, but there was the cross there. The cross was there. So if the cross was there, God was there. And the first thing that I wanted to do was run to the pulpit, and I threw myself on the floor, face first. And I started weeping. And I was crying like a baby. And it was just my moment of clarity and realization that, bro, you got to wear this. This is it. These three, you got to focus, and you got to wear this, and you really got to get it together. And I just prayed and I wept, and I would ask God that during this time that he would just spare me. And if he would spare me, that I would just give him my life forever. The Lord, it was so strategic. I got locked up at a time that the Lord knew that he'd keep me and bring me out, and I'd have a story to tell. I saw my family almost every week because I stayed in Miami. They came, they were able to visit me. My dad was able to, counsel me on Saturdays. He'd come through, spend 3 hours with me. My mother could, shower me with love. My fiance at the time, who's now my wife, but my fiance at the time, Marissa, she would visit me, and it was just so amazing, man. Just 2 or 3 hours with them. You could do a whole week in prison just knowing that you're gonna see them on Saturday, man. Nothing could happen throughout the week that you couldn't bear, that you couldn't go through, because you knew those people would be there for you. And it was that love. It was that love that I always had all the time, and I just took for granted. I took it for granted. I had it every day. I had it every day outside of prison. It didn't take me to be locked up to get this love. I had it for free. And the worst thing is, it didn't have to happen. I remember coming home. It was February 6th. It was February 6th, 2007. My wife picked me up. My fiance at the time picked me up, and we drove to my old job. And ironically enough, it's my old boss at my old job allowed me to work there during my work release. It was a conditional thing. You're allowed to go out to work, but you come back to the halfway house. So that was towards the end of my sentence. So the first place that I went to was my old job. And I walked through all the hallways in a nice classy shirt that my wife bought me. And I told them, hey, I'm home. I could leave. I could come whenever I want. And then, my boss gave me a hug. All my workers gave me a hug. And like, we love you, man. We knew you could do it. And then when I went outside, my whole family was out there. My mom, my dad, everybody, brother-in-law, little nephews, everybody was out there. Everybody who did that time with me was out there. The Sunday morning after the Saturday I came home, it was church service. And they called me up. They called me up to the front. And it was like the prodigal son. It was just like the scripture verbatim. It was they brought out the purple robe. They put it on me. My dad put this ring on me that I carry to this day as my wedding ring. And they just honored me. And the whole church, they prayed for me and just welcomed me back to the family. And it was one of the most amazing days of my life, because I thought my life was over. I didn't think that I could really, bounce back, just because I thought that I brought so much shame. I mean, I know I could bounce back other ways, but I didn't think that I'd be able to get back in, how I was. It's just your mind plays with you and like, nah, they're not gonna receive you. But on the contrary, they received me. We had a big feast, and I was home. Some people get dead or in jail. That's always been my thing. Some people get dead or in jail, and I got jail. And it was the most amazing thing that happened, because through that time, I was able to reflect all the things that I was neglecting, all the time that I was wasting. So when I came home, I made it a pact that I would never waste time again like that. And my fiance, who stood with me those 3 years, I made an honest woman out of her. I married her 2 days later in the courthouse. And we were able to start our life together and start our dreams together now, forward to now. I have 2 children. I have a 5-year-old daughter. I have a 2-year-old son. We have a home. I'm living out my dreams. And it's all because of God.